Hello, I'm Ruben Anthony, the President and CEO of the Urban League of Greater Madison. And I want to stress that the basis of our democracy is that we pick our leaders. And that no matter what we endure as a country, pandemics, wars, hard times, the will of the people always prevails. Despite the many barriers to voting in 2020, we turned out in record numbers to make our voices heard. It's time we move forward with the leaders we, the people, have chosen. Because that's what America does. We move forward together.
This is Henry Sanders back with another season of Real Talk, and we're in 2021. My first episode for 2021. A lot has happened since we've last done our Real Talk, and I wanted to make sure that this year we're set out for the blast. I want to bring out somebody people know as my friend. For you people who don't know, Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson is the CEO of the Boys Good Girls Club in Dane County in Madison, Wisconsin. And he has, in 2020, when COVID-19 hit, he pivoted and did amazing things where a lot of organizations were hurting, were trying to figure out what to do. Michael actually thrived as a nonprofit leader and executive leader, not only as a leader of his organization, but he also thrived as a leader of the community. And so I really thought it was appropriate to bring him on for people who are running nonprofits, but also people who are just influencers and leaders to kind of hear out what he did and why he did it. And, how is he still flourishing in the time of COVID-19 and some of the things to expect in 2021. I got to bring my man on. Michael Johnson. How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on, Henry.
It's good to see you, man, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too, and hope the family's all good and well.
Yeah, same to you, man. I see Toya, you still living, so Toya hasn't killed you over there yet.
hey, she hasn't gotten rid of me yet. She's never seen me in this house this much, so I'm still around, still living, and glad to be here, seriously, in 2021.
Yeah, so we got a lot to hit on, MJ. I want this interview to be for the young up-and-comers who are trying to come up and trying to make moves and want to make an impact and influence. I also want to be for the people who are like running organizations who are influencers, especially nonprofit leaders, MJ, to talk about all the stuff you're doing. Like there's a quote that I've been reading the books over COVID, and there's a quote that reminded me of you. It's by a guy named Urban Meyer, who was the coach for Ohio State University. Now he's about to coach the Jaguar. And he said, average leaders have quotes, good leaders have a plan, exceptional leaders have a system. And all those things, like when I heard that, I automatically thought about you because you have all these systems in place that people don't know about that you actually flourish. So first, let's talk about last year, COVID-19 hits, and as a leader and as an executive leader and a CEO of an organization that does a lot for the community, what was your mindset at that point? Because, some people can think, hey, that means the funding's going to dry up or I'm going to have to cut staff. What was your mindset when COVID-19 hit, and what did you do?
I think for me, it was about, how do we when you look at the history of pandemics in this country, usually the people who are the most marginalized are the ones who are the most hurt, right? And so sometimes, as leaders, we can do the easy things, right? A lot of times, nonprofit and business leaders will look at the expense side and say, I could just cut my way out of this situation. And I just believe we couldn't do that at Boys and Girls Clubs, right? So it's easy to lay staff off. It's easy to cut back on expenses. And so we just decided that if we do the right thing, right, if we go out and make an impact on people's lives and be relevant based on what we're hearing in the marketplace, we could become change makers and difference makers. And I think we've done that, this year. And as a result of that, we've been able to help more people than we've ever outside of our kids at Boys and Girls Clubs while not losing our shirts in the process.
So did you decide when this happened, did you double down? How did you fundraise? Because you actually fundraised a decent amount of money last year, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so what was your strategy when that hit, when COVID-19 first hit? What was your strategy of fundraising? Like, what was your tactics for doing that?
So I'll tell you, part of it is grit, right? You just gotta, you gotta just wake up. I get up every day at about 4:30, and I usually go hard all the way up until 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. And some of it is just grit. Some of it has to be passion. If you're passionate about, the work that you do, it'll just come naturally, right? Secondly, as the pandemic hit, I just started listening to a bunch of people, from school teachers to nonprofit leaders to business leaders to folks who live in the neighborhoods. And what happened when you pick up intel from a variety of different people, I think it helps you to strategize on what your plan is. And I also was watching what was going on in the news. So immediately, I knew that based on intel that we were getting, that the city and the county was about to shut down. So immediately I was like, if the schools are closed, how are we going to feed all these kids throughout Dane County? And I remember going to my board. We had a major fundraiser coming up called Shamrock Shuffle, and I canceled it before the city even said we need. I started hearing what was going on CNN and MSNBC and Fox News. And I said, we have to cancel this event. So even though it's a $100,000 fundraiser, we'll figure out we can't risk getting people sick. And so we immediately, I remember talking to you, we launched this campaign and said, let's try to raise maybe $100,000 to help families. And then we ended up partnering with Selfless Ambition, United Way, ended up raising over $2 million and gave it away to over 40 different agencies. And when you think about if we didn't do that, and I remember there was some people that was a part of my team saying, why are we raising all this money for other agencies? Isn't that going to hurt Boys and Girls Club? I said, absolutely not. I'm a man of faith. So I believe that when you do good by others, God would do good by you. And I'm just a firm believer that if you are a blessing to other people, you will be blessed in the process. So not only were we able to raise money for all these other organizations and pay the bills of families in need and get medicine to people and to feed kids and to give away cars, and we were able to do it and still balance our budget and still be able to pay our staff. And it's been amazing just to see the generosity of people and also the skill set of those that I've hired around me.
So did you hit your fundraising goal for last year? Or
Yeah,
was it?
we exceeded it. So every single one. So even though we didn't have Shamrock Shuffle, we had our normal Bike for Boys and Girls Club campaign. I remember going to my management team and my board. I said, we're not going to do a bike ride this year. A lot of times I go walking. When I go walking, if I'm by myself, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just a blessing that I get from God. Sometimes God would just reveal things to me. And I remember going on like a 4 or 5 minute walk. And I remember something as I'm thinking, I'm like, man, how do we raise $500,000? And so we decided, after I spoke with a few people, prayed on it, walked on it, I was like, okay, we're going to feed first responders because we have healthcare workers and police officers and people who are working during this pandemic that's going to need food. And I heard from nurses that they were working 15, 16-hour shifts and eating out of vending machines. So one strategy was, let's feed our healthcare workers throughout Dane County. 2, we knew that we had to go to a virtual platform. So let's raise money to make sure that while kids are not in school, let's beef up our virtual platforming program to make sure that we're providing, support, to those young people. And then the third strategy was to do business with local restaurants. We knew that restaurants were struggling financially. We knew we had to feed kids. So we ended up partnering with Chef Dave Heidi, who partnered with 20 other organizations, and we fed kids all over Dane County. As a result of that, our fundraising goal was $500,000, and we ended up raising almost 800,000.
Well, that's amazing. If someone's listening right now, MJ, and they want to know what are the key, because you came in the Boys and Girls Club, what, 7 years ago now? Is it 7 years ago?
11.
And your budget kit was about $1 million at that time. It was about what, $5 million, $6 million now at the budget? What is it?
7 million now, yeah.
Yep. Okay, and you turned that around quick. What would you give? And people you're not from Madison or Wisconsin, most people know that Michael is probably the premier fundraiser in the state. And I mean, I think most people would admit that. So Michael, what are the 3 things you could tell someone, a nonprofit executive wants to learn how to fundraise? Because I mean, there's so much. You and I have talked about so many different things you do, how you build your list, how you built your donor list, how you see them. Like 3 things. I know this is giving you out your secret sauce too, brother. So I know like you give some secret sauce out here right now. But what are 3 things you would give advice you would give someone? Like what are the true tactics that you would say for fundraising?
Yeah, so I would say one. First, I don't usually ask people for major gifts that I don't know, right? So one, get to know who your potential prospects are and develop a list of people that can help support your organization. So for example, at Boys and Girls Clubs, I built up our donor database from about 1,800 donors to about 17,000. So we have a lot of people that give us $75 and $100, and you add that up, it comes to a significant amount of money. And so I would say don't become too dependent on one funding source or government funding. 4 out of 5 philanthropic dollars come from individual contributions. So meet with people face to face. Even in this environment, you can meet with donors virtually and spend the time to make those phone calls, get to know your donors. I've tried to over the years, whether it's play softball with my donors, go to their funerals, go to their weddings, go to their neighborhood barbecues. You have to get to know your donors. The second piece I would say is human capital, right? Successful nonprofits have very, very strong boards. You're only as strong as your governance structure. So at Boys and Girls Clubs, we evaluate our board members every year through an annual board report card that we do. And we look at their time, their talent, and their treasure. So we've built a small army of about 30 people on our board, but we have almost 100 people through our governance structure who are actively involved in our committees. So building that team around you so you're not going at it by yourself. And then the third thing I would say is that you got to be able to deliver on the promise, right? So for me, is if you get a donation one time, you want to get those donations coming on a regular basis. So it's good to engage your donors in the work that you do, because if you have an engaged donor, you're going to have a very happy and giving donor. So sometimes it's not always about the money, it's about the relationship and connecting them to the work. And I would say that's probably some of the secret sauce that we have at Boys and Girls Clubs. And we've grown about $500,000 every single year. We went from serving 1,800 kids to almost 18,000. We went from 2 facilities to now managing 13 facilities in Madison, Fitchburg, Walworth County, Dane County, Sun Prairie, Madison. We've grown from 18 employees to almost 200. We run the largest college preparatory program in the Madison School District, where a third of our staff, work, in the schools. We're one of the fastest growing Boys and Girls Clubs, in the United States. And we do things traditionally that Boys and Girls Clubs don't do. So I would say if you are a leader of an organization, do not allow people to define your leadership by geography. You have to stay within your mission, but you can also challenge and evolve your mission. And we have done that, at Boys and Girls Club.
One of the things that's always interesting to me about you is, I deal with a lot of leaders, as you know, all the time, and talk to a lot of leaders. But the ones who seem to be successful are sort of found their passion. And like you mentioned earlier, you get up at 4:30 a.m. and you keep going to nonstop. But you love what you do. Like you literally love what you do. How did you? I'm just curious, MJ. Like, would you say like helping, serving is like your mission in life? Like, what is what would you define your mission? What helps get you up at 4:30 in the morning that you can get up at 4:30 in the morning with the kids, with the wife, and still hit that grind every day? Like, what is that in you?
Yeah, I think part of it is my upbringing, right? So, I grew up in the projects in Chicago. I was a Boys and Girls Club kid, but I was also fortunate that I was able to step away from Boys and Girls Clubs into different positions, right? I worked for the mayor of Philadelphia. I worked for the CEO of the school district, in Chicago and Philadelphia. I ran a psychiatric hospital for kids. I was temporarily, for a few months, the CEO of United Way. So I was fortunate that outside of my 17 years of working for Boys and Girls Clubs of Chicago, in the Boys and Girls Clubs here in Dane County, I was able to leave and work in the private sector and work in the government sector. And I would say those are two sectors that I probably would never want to go in again, because on the government side, it was too bureaucratic, too slow for me. And then I would say on the private side that the passion just wasn't there. So, so I would say, given, the environment that I grew up in extreme poverty and one of the toughest housing developments in the country in Chicago, and a high-rise development. And Boys and Girls Clubs played a pivotal role in my life. I remember somebody saying, why is Boys and Girls Clubs helping to pay for funerals? Why is Boys and Girls Clubs helping to pay people's rent? That's outside of your mission, And so I remember having those discussions with my board. When my mother passed away, I was 22 years old. I was a young coordinator for Boys and Girls Clubs, and my mother didn't have life insurance or health insurance, and we didn't know how we were going to bury my mother. And I remember my family struggled, and her body had been sitting in the morgue for about 4 or 5 days. I think we had only came up with a couple of $1,000. And I remember the vice president of Boys and Girls Clubs at the time called me into her office and handed me $4,000 in cash. And it was pretty much a love offering that Boys and Girls Club employees had took up to help us bury my mother. And I was a part-time staff at Boys and Girls Clubs. And I just never forgot that. And so when I think of like the stuff that we do, sometimes these families are need a hand up. And I said, if I was ever in a position where I could control resources and have any influence, I'm going to do whatever I can within whatever limited power that I have to pay it forward and to help other people. And I view this assignment not as a job, but as a ministry. It's a ministry of doing good work, God's work, to pay it forward for other people. And I think that when we're in leadership roles like this, you have to earn the right every single day to sit at the table. But at the same time, you got to take care of yourself, too, so you can be at the table in the long haul. So I've learned that even though I get up early, mornings like today, I started a meeting at 6:45 this morning. And the whole time it was a 2-hour walk. So I went and got 17,000 steps in while I was on that call. So it's a balance of eating right. It's a balance of making sure that you're taking care of your temple. But at the same time, when you're in roles like this, you can't just come in, do a 9 to 5 and ignore issues that you see in the community. So I would say people have supported, my leadership, but sometimes people have been very, very critical of my leadership. But I see it as that's what comes with the territory when you publicly lead.
Well, which leads to another question is being a leader is not easy. And especially in these times, how do you make a decision when you're going to take a risk and go out and be a voice or be an advocate for something that is going to get some pushback? How do you do that? Like, how do you do that? Then how do you balance out with your board? Because I know sometimes your board has to be like, what are you doing taking food to Florida? What are you doing over here dealing with guns? Or what are you doing? Like, for Black leaders, it's usually hard. Leaders of color, it's usually hard to, as you know this, MJ, to get outside your lane. Like, it's hard enough just to do your job and thrive. but you're actually doing your job and then doing stuff outside the core of the mission, or what some people would say is at the core of the mission of Boys and Girls Club. So how do you, as a CEO, how do you do that as an advocate and also do your job and keeping your stakeholders also on board? That's a skill.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill, right? So what I've learned over the years, you got to bring people along with you, and you have to educate them along with you. So there are social justice components that's built into our strategic plan. And our board and our stakeholders, I believe, understand it, but some don't. And unfortunately, when you speak up on issues that could be controversial or uncomfortable, you're going to gain supporters and you're going to lose some. So I've had my fair share of fights with internal stakeholders and external stakeholders, but that's okay. But I believe that if you follow your conviction and, as a man of faith, I pray and I digest on things and I consult with people, even if it's something that I know that could be controversial or may be uncomfortable, I believe that if it's the right thing to do, you will always come out on the winning side. Even if you lose the short-term battle, you will win in the long haul. Because I just believe, my wife always said, my wife license plates say covered, right? And so I believe that you are covered if you do the right thing, even if there's unbelievable pressure being bestowed upon you, right? I remember, there was a petition that went out this year that had me fired. And some people were really, really upset with me because, after the protest downtown, I had called on almost 3,000 people showed up to clean up our downtown area after I asked them to come down. And then I ended up raising $250,000 for, downtown businesses. And oh my God, pissed off a lot of people. I was like, we're going to have peacekeepers. And it's not that I was at odds with anybody. I just fundamentally believe that, destruction to property, burning things down took away from the message that many of our young people were trying to communicate during very, very challenging times. And I knew I was going to get some backlash, and that was okay. And I think sometimes you got to be willing as a leader to sit very uncomfortably in your seat to be able to see change happen. And I would tell you, I've been sitting uncomfortable in my seat for many, many years in this community.
Well, I think one thing you didn't mention, though, is for you to be able to do all that stuff, you have to be producing, right? So if you're not hitting your goals, you're not fundraising, you're not doing the things that you said excelling, then you do this other stuff, they're going to give you less leeway to do that, right? But you've always excelled, so you're always hitting your goals, which is it's amazing to me, MJ, that you hit the things that you do all the time, from the fundraising to increase your donors. It's just it's a skill that I actually wish you go teach seminars on this stuff, because you actually have a skill set that a lot of people don't have. Like, for example, talk to people, MJ, about fundraising, but also you have to manage the funds when they come into your organization, right? Yeah. And so, as a nonprofit executive, you have an auditor that audits the auditor, right? Like you have this really system internally about how you manage your system and you manage your finances. I have not ran into another executive who does this. So just walk people through what you do to manage the funds when they come in.
So I think one, you got to be willing to build up the internal infrastructure of your team, right? You got to hire very, very smart people, right? So, I've hired people from all over the country, promoted people within here in Madison. Some have stayed, some have gone on to become presidents of foundations and school chiefs and gone to go work for the UW and different leadership capacities. So what I've learned is that if you have a strong governance process, you have the right board members, and your finances have to be on point, right? So if you're running a nonprofit and some people say, why are you so transparent? And we were raising money for the pandemic. People are like, Michael, you're actually probably doing yourself a disservice. You're telling people every dollar that you got coming in. I said, why would you not be transparent? We'll share what money came in and we'll share what money get out. And if some people criticize us for how we spend it, let it be. But we're going to follow the process that we put in place. So on the finance side, I say you got to make sure you have a very, very strong finance team. Like, so for me, I make sure that we balance our budget every single year, right? So if you're not balancing your budget, it makes it very, very hard for you to go do other things out in the community. I tell my team all the time, if there's no margin, there's no mission. So somebody said, well, that sounds very capitalistic, right? I disagree, right? So if you're running deficits every year, will you truly be able to fulfill your mission if you're not financially stable? So you have to run your organization like it's a business. You got to look at your profits. You got to look at loss. You got to do budget projections. You got to make sure that you got the right financial controls in place to make sure that you're healthy. And in my 11 years at Boys and Girls Club, we've had a clean audit every single year because we manage our budget. And then even when grants come in, I was just telling somebody on my team, it's one thing to get a grant, and they're beautiful. They're beautiful when they come in, but you can absolutely destroy your reputation if you take money from a funder and tell them you're going to do one thing and do the total opposite. Or you take their resources and then don't report out on the things that you said you were going to do, because at some point that time is going to come to an end. And you're going to probably have to go back to them. So I can't share the organization, but we just got a $700,000 grant from a national foundation. And they gave us $1 million 5 years ago. And we went in, gave our presentation, and I felt confident. I said, we did every single thing we told you we were going to do 5 years ago. In our presentation, we said we would do X, Y, and Z. And not only did we do X, Y, and Z, we did A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and everything else, right? And I was able to, me and my team, walk them through how we exceeded every single last one of those goals. And within 20 minutes, they called me back later and said, congratulations, we're giving you a $700,000 grant. And so you got to be able to deliver on the things that you say you're going to deliver on, because if you don't, what'll happen, I've always tried to make connections in different parts of our community, right? In our grassroots community, with local parents, with business leaders. I feel like I can walk in almost any community in this room, right? I can give a presentation in a boardroom with 50 executives, but I also can get down with the best of them on the streets and have a real conversation with street dudes, because I understand where many of them are at. And I try to keep those connections between both worlds to keep me relevant. And so I understand what some of the challenges are so we can respond to them accordingly.
It's interesting that you're saying about basically, you can walk in different worlds. Some people say it's code switching, whatever you want to say. But how do you stay? Because you're like me. Like one thing about me, I walk in every room by myself. Like I don't switch for people. I'm like, I just, at this point in my age, I am who I am, right? So like I don't switch for people. And you're the same way. You and I have been in the same room. You're the same Michael Johnson if we're in the room with the governor. You're the same Michael Johnson if we're in Chicago. You're the same Michael Johnson if we're in Florida. You know what I mean? Like you're the same Michael Johnson you mentioned with a big donor, CEOs. And that a lot of people, especially people of color, when you're dealing with, mostly white area and dealing with a lot of white people, that's like the imposter syndrome. Like you try to fake and act because you feel you have to act and position and be a certain way. And, and I get it. Like you have to survive. You try to navigate the systems. What advice would you give people who have to be in those situations who are trying to figure out how to survive, but feel like they're doing that imposter syndrome? Like they're trying to, dance and navigate the system, but they also listen to their authentic selves.
Yeah.
Well, how did you get where you are now? You could do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I would say, here's what I would say. My rule of thumb is be who you are, right? Because if you're faking it, at some point you're going to slip up, right? So I don't really believe in code switching. Be who you are. Now, with that being said, if you know you have some developmental issues, you got to work on them, right? So one of my developmental issues were, I used to stutter a lot, and I was not a really, really good presenter. So I used to, and I didn't have the money to go. When I was a student at Malcolm X College, I remember my teacher trying to teach me how to enunciate, my words. And so I would spend hours and hours in the bathroom in the in the bathroom, in the mirror, giving speeches to myself and recording them and say, man, I got to work on this. I got to work on that. So if you know you got things you got to work on, just practice and practice until you get it. And that's not code switching. That's just trying to get better at a skill that you're good at. I would also say invest in yourself, right? So I was somebody when I graduated from high school, couldn't read, couldn't write at the collegiate level until I went to University of Minnesota and found out that I couldn't pass any of my classes. It ended up leaving, and it took me, 8 years to get my bachelor's degree. That was the best thing that ever happened to me, and so even after I got my bachelor's and my master's, I still went and got a bunch of certifications. And so if you want to run a nonprofit, you got to know how to raise money. So I went to the School of Philanthropy at Indiana University to become a certified fundraiser. Also, when you manage a nonprofit, you got to know how to manage volunteers and people and human capital. So I went to Cornell University and became a certified human resources executive. Then I also went to University of Michigan and got a certification in advanced leadership at the Ross School of Business, because you have to have good business practices to be able to manage the financials and the assets of your organization. And I would just say continue to invest in you and surround yourself around smart people. Now, I will say this. There's a lot of people that got a whole bunch of degrees, and some are really good, and some are as dumb as a doorknob. So don't equate degrees with being smart. To me, it's about a combination of practical experience and education, and you learning from others and being humble and being able to take advice. I think will help you grow in the process.
MJ, I'm loving that you're saying this, right? Because one, it's funny. I'm listening to you. Probably saw my face when you said like you had to learn how to speak and give presentations. Like you speak in front of people all the time. You're wonderful at it. Like you seem so natural at it. But it shows that how hard work. You talk to leaders all the time, and one thing always, all of them really work hard and put in the work, right? And so like you just saying that you being in the bathroom, imagine people, Michael Johnson being in the bathroom, Mr. Charming himself, all personality, gets in this practice in front of the mirror. That's a powerful statement, man. So I think that's true. And my wife gets on me all the time about this because she has a master's degree. I don't. And, we always debate this. I'm like, I'm not really big on PhDs and all that stuff. I'm big on practitioners. Like meaning that people actually do the work. Now, I'm big on learning. I believe that you have to learn and learn, never stop learning. Like I read like a book a week, literally like a book a week. But so I'm like, I kind of tend to fall for the people who are actually doing the work, and I actually learn from them. So it's interesting that you're saying that too. MJ, if you were going to tell someone how to deal with negativity as a leader, because how would you tell people how to deal with that, right? Because like we put out the most influential Midwest list. Congratulations, by the way, for making it. And first time we did it, and we got a lot of negative. I mean, there's a lot of overwhelming positive. Like it had to be our biggest list. We had over 1,000 people like it. I mean, like it's the biggest list we've ever done, 365 ever. But we got a lot of hate and negativity. And so I could see how some leaders could see that and not want to take risks because of what might happen if they take a risk or if they step out, that it might not be popular with everyone. They might get people on Facebook. Hey, and I think I see someone on your Facebook that had a sign saying like, I didn't like Michael Johnson or something right there, right?
Gatekeeper of white privilege.
I saw that. I'm like, Michael's made it. If you got people out here having signs out, man, you must be doing some work. But what would you tell advice? I mean, seriously, because it's not something that everyone can deal with, right? I tend to think it comes hand in hand. Like more success you get, more hate you're going to get. But how do you deal with it?
I would say, you grow into it, right? So it's like no matter what you do, people, some will celebrate you, some will have envious spirits of your work. And then some will outright try to take you out for a variety of reasons. So, sometimes I ignore it when I need to. Sometimes if it's somebody that is being really, really stupid, you may have to use legal support to be able to address some of those issues. Sometimes you take it head on, but you keep focused on the work, right? And you can't allow your naysayers to be a distraction, to you, right? Now, you may have sometimes people that might take shots at you. And if you feel like, man, there's some themes that I'm hearing, maybe there's some truth in it. Maybe you want to self-reflect and see how you can get better, at that. I would tell you in my 11 years here, we've gotten a lot of praise. I've also taken a lot of body shots and maybe a few head shots too here as the leader of Boys and Girls Clubs. Well, I just think it comes with the territory. And, I would just say just this week alone, right, I've had people take, shots at me for a variety, of different reasons. And sometimes I respond to it. Sometimes I ignore it. But somebody gave me this advice years ago. Anytime somebody, I grew up in the project. So it's like if somebody swing at you with a brick, you take a brick and you swing right back at them. And I operated like that for many years. I don't care who took a shot at me, I would shoot back. I think what I've learned, somebody once told me, I think you sent this to me. It was from TD Jakes, and then somebody else sent it to me again. It said, when you are a giraffe, you see things at a very, very high altitude. And then a lot of times you have turtles who see things at the level that they see things at. And as you're navigating through the forest, you can't fight with every turtle that's on the ground. You got to keep your eye on the prize. And it's not that they're not relevant. Sometimes they may not see things at the view that you see things at. And so I've just recognized that and just decided to, respond accordingly when I need to and ignore it when I have to and just keep the ball moving and rolling.
Yeah, I would suggest if anyone get a chance, you should Google like TD Jakes, and he's talking about turtles and giraffes. So Michael explained it pretty well. He wasn't taking shots at people. TD Jakes was just saying that the turtles are at one level and they can only go by what they see and what they know. And the giraffe is higher up. So the giraffe is seeing more and the turtle sometimes can't see what the giraffe is seeing. So it criticizes the giraffe for doing things, but it can't see what the giraffe sees. But obviously TD Jakes says it much better than I did. So check that out. If you get a chance, Google that and check that out because it's really well said. So MJ, before we go, man, tell me what's your projections for 2021 this year, because you're like one of the top fundraisers I know in the country. What do you see for nonprofits and some of the challenges are going to be? And quickly, I only do a couple of minutes of what do you see the challenges for this year for nonprofits and fundraising, and what can they do to deal with those things?
So I'm gonna respond to that, but I'm gonna say part of my leadership, I would say, moving forward is it's just a little nugget you gave me too. And actually, I told this to my board last month. I'm going to kind of operate like Dr. Dre, right? So for many, many years, I was the artist. I was out there on the front line. This year, I'm going to be more like the producer. A little bit of artist, a little bit of art making, but I'm going to highlight and build up other leaders in the process. I'm going to grow the work of Boys and Girls Clubs in different markets. We're going to impact kids to make sure that they are growing academically. I'm going to increase the financial stability of Boys and Girls Clubs. So when I'm gone from Boys and Girls Clubs, that this organization will be around for beyond my lifetime and years to come. I'm also going to make sure that we build up a strong volunteer base and help our community address some of the racial disparities that we see. And Henry, if I can, I would love to just share a couple of bullet points of some of the things that we accomplished this year. And I think next year with the team that we've built, we're going to double down again. So just this year, Henry alone, we organized the largest face mask giveaway in the state of Wisconsin. We're currently giving away 1 million masks and almost 1 million hand sanitizers that's valued at over $2 million. That's what we're doing at our local Boys and Girls Club. This Christmas, we purchased toys for over 500 kids and gave away, 4 cars. Now, this was not money that came out of Boys and Girls Club's budget. We typically, we just basically put the ask out there, and people stepped up, gave away the stimulus checks, and said, hey, we want to pay it forward, and we trust that Boys and Girls Clubs would do the right thing, because of this. We provided over 100,000 meals for families in need. We talked about this already, the fact that between me, you, and United Way, that we raised millions of dollars to support, thousands of people throughout the community. We fed first responders. And then even we're working on a project now to make sure that our state capital has representation in Wisconsin. And I believe when we go in front of the executive board at the state, that we're going to be in a position to have a person of color, a Black woman by the name of Vale Phillips statue outside of our state capitol. This woman was the first Black woman to graduate from UW Law School, the first Black woman to be elected to any office, statewide office in the United States, our first Black judge. And I believe that she's going to be represented, at our state capitol. And those are just a couple of small things that we have done, over the last, 12 months. And I'm hoping that next year, with the support that we're going to build, one of our donors just 2 weeks ago said, Mike, we love what you did during the Christmas. Can I give you $60,000 to pay for somebody to do this work year round? We hired that person, started on Monday. She was actually one of the families that we helped. She lost her job. We gave her a car. She came in, volunteered at Boys and Girls Clubs, and now she got a big-time job at Boys and Girls Clubs, leading up our efforts to pay it forward for other families year-round.
Wow. Well, Michael, thank you for all you're doing, and I hope people got so. I mean, honestly, I say this, and I want to interview you because I wanted people to hear all the stuff that you're doing. Because this year I think it's going to be another challenging year, and people have to pivot. But what I love about you is that you're having that Be Selfless shirt on, is that you're selfless in what you do, and that you find ways for it to come back. So, I appreciate everything you're doing. Keep up the good work, and keep helping all the people you're helping. We got to get you back on another Real Talk at some other point, man, and this year. But thanks, MJ, for all you're doing. We appreciate it. Keep the faith. Tell Toya I said, what's up, Toya? Till I pray for her, Toya. I said I pray for her every day because I know she got to put up with you. So,
and this sister got me about to work. She always got me washing dishes. I got a meeting next. And she's sitting here holding up a sign to me, I got to wash the dishes. My nerves sometimes, man. But I love her. I love me some Toya Whitaker Johnson.
All right. And we'll see you next time on Real Talk. Appreciate you.
This is 365 Media.